I never stop talking.
So to orient you, we started just off the map. Here's our last stop. We drove here, and we stopped right there.
Out of the way. I just wanted to get the.
In terms of scale,
For your reference.
we hit just a small slice of the lake. It's hard to convey how big the lake is. So we're stopped out over here, and this is the first. Also, I put my hard hat on as a reminder. This is a construction site. They're big trucks. Please be careful if you are in the area. Do not go near that truck because things fall off. There's like 40 tons of gravel in that truck.
It's like trying to stop squeeze area.
That's just gravel coming off, smashing a car window. It's coming by.
So this is part of our first real test of that sort of three-legged stool idea, where we try to design habitat aesthetic features. You sort of feel all this. It changed, right? Instead of this linear thing, you got berms that are wavy and rocks. So that was also another component that our landowner once incorporated, and that's make sure it's not too industrial. So Phase 7A, we did this. It was to take those ideas of collaboration and saving water and incorporate it here, where we redesigned all of this to meet goals for birds. And to do that, we've developed what we call a habitat suitability model that quantitatively identifies what do birds like. A lot of the shorebirds here, they like shallow water. So a deep pond is worthless to them. So you make a lot of really shallow ponds. Salinity is another very important part. Owens Lake is so productive because it has a moderate salinity. There's lots of areas that have a moderate salinity. Very, very productive. Too fresh, and you get diversity, but you don't get sheer amounts of brine fly, brine shrimp, those are the things. And then too saline, and you lose at least invert life. Is there a question?
Yeah, how do you guys mitigate the evaporation with such shallow water that you guys put out here?
Well, there's a lot of evaporation.
You don't get the water back, yeah.
It
goes away. No walls.
Yeah, that's where all the water goes. Water doesn't infiltrate here. Clay soil doesn't infiltrate, but your ET, as we call it, just in shorthand, is immense.
So is there just
So
constant influence to keep those shallow?
Yes. So the main dust season, it sort of luckily corresponds to the bird migration season, spring and fall, and that's also the season that has a little less ET. So midsummer, we still provide a little bit of water, but it's nowhere near the amount. So the evaporation isn't. I think it's roughly, if you count up how much water evaporates at our reservoir in Haywee, it's about 8 feet. You use 8 feet of water a year. Here, it's more like 4, because it's a little more saline, evaporates less, and we have a shorter dust season.
What's
So
the area of that reservoir? Like surface to top?
I don't know. So here is that test. So you can see I talked about the shallow pond. So it was all very carefully regraded, and then you see lots of islands out there. So that's to give birds some protection from mammalian predators, coyotes in particular. Coyotes are a big predator out here. And then you kind of see some other structures out there. There's some aesthetic, or some recreational features out there. And if you look from the sky, I'll hand out a couple of those Owens Lake brochures I handed you. Yeah, they're the landscape architecture's idea of what Owens Lake and a windy day would look like, these kind of wave structures. So there's all sorts of these components mixed in. And it was largely successful. We saved water. We were able to, we used that water to control more areas. And our last bird count, we far exceeded what it was even before. So yeah, pretty successful project. Sort of the test phase of what we're going to be doing with the overall. And so that was done, back to the collaboration with Mike and Audubon and our regulators at State Lands, Cal Fish and Wildlife, getting everyone on board as to how do we do it. And that the main crux is this habitat suitability model. Everyone agrees to is like this quantifies what the birds want, and that's important. And it was I think it was a shift from this more litigious, more confrontational. We all had a stake, is what we call the Habitat Work Group. We all had a stake in developing the best model. Audubon definitely wants it because a better model is going to have more birds. He wants it because a better model, if you can understand bird use, you can target your water use better to produce birds and use a waterless method elsewhere and save water that way. So Mike, would you like to add anything?
I was talking about birds in the back row. Like I said, back at the visitor center, I started birding out here, and we collected data and things in the little postage stamp places, the little seeps around the lake back in the early '80s. And I had no idea that this was coming. You know, this was truly amazing. My eyes welled up at the Bird Festival last year when I was speaking at the kind of the plenary session, trying to talk about what happened, because it truly was. It was so remarkable because it was hard to do, and it took a long time. But if we just kind of kept everybody in the room, you know, the state lands owns the land, Fish and Wildlife manages the wildlife for us. DWP has the project. Audubon's a cheerleader. You know, we're not an authorized agency. You know, we're not part of legislation. We can educate people. We can motivate people. When DWP and state lands were no longer talking to each other, we could try to get them in the room together and keep them in the room together. So we had this catalyst function, kind of an educator function. So I just think that, and Jeff is. I'll embarrass him a little bit, but because he is like the lead biologist for all of this, a lot of the modeling stuff. I mean, he has people, including himself, that come out here and count birds and collect data. But the modeling, the theoretical aspects, the statistics, well, my eyes just roll back in my head. Jeff's just right in the middle of that and steering his team, and then sitting at the table with Fish and Wildlife and Audubon and occasionally state lands, and even the air pollution district is still there. They always say, we don't do birds, you know, we don't do birds, but they're important as part of this. I can't remember if did you talk about guilds?
No, but yeah, we certainly did.
Well, in that model where we try to find out what the birds like, you know, that a shorebird is different than a diving duck, you know. The birds kind of lumped up a little bit. I mean, there's certain birds that share the same kind of likes, you know, like people in music and food and stuff. So, I mean, certain birds, different kinds of birds like deeper water. Other kind of birds like, you know, so these guilds were created, like a shorebird group, you know, and then a diving duck type group. And I can't remember where we're at now. 4, we had 6 at one time. But we've done a little bit of lumping. The thing about models is that they're alive and they're artificial, and so you have to, as you learn more, get more numbers, you keep changing the model. You fine tune it. It's like working on your car. So that's how the guilds work.
So let me add to the modeling.
Yeah.
So you know, birds they integrate just almost an infinite number of variables when they choose to go to an area. And the model is, you know, a model is a simplification of the world. And so you can take, in some we've taken 3 essential habitat variables, some up to 7 or 8. And using that information and a lot of bird counts, you can identify, well, what are they keying on? And even you separate it out to those few habitat parameters, and you could still predict half to 60% of the variation of bird use. So it's pretty amazing that just a few very important, the key variables, you identify them, and you can use those to, like I said, not only predict where birds are, but design habitat, use that information as a recipe to design habitat. So you mentioned the pond there. We talked about managed veg, all new saltgrass. That was the new thing here too. Instead of just having one species, a monoculture of one species that's a farm essentially, it's hard to tell now because it's all brown.
But out here in the summer.
Yeah, when you come out, if you come out here in the summer, and this area right here is open to public access, so you're welcome to. I have a few brochures we can hand around. The main access areas we'll exit. There's 30 different vegetation species in here. Now we've been able to. This is the fresher of the areas, and so able to get it within tolerance of some of the other wetland species that are all natives. There's even some willows that occur here, and that provides structure for a lot of different species here.
Yeah, so the birds can teach us because they're choosing the habitats. I mean, we know where they like, the places they like, and one of the reasons we were able for Audubon to try to help save water is that we saw lots of places where there was widespread water, and year after year, there were no birds in there, virtually at all, ever. And so we knew the sweet spots because the birds were voting with their wings or their feet. And so we were able to come to DWP in Los Angeles and say we realized the hit you're taking on this water. And we're willing to help you save some if you're willing to help us enhance and protect habitat. That's the kind of the grand bargain. And one of the senior managers in LA, I remember him at a meeting in '07 after this big field trip that I organized in '06. He said, he said, if you can show me ways to save water, then I can get decision makers in LA to say yes. And that was a huge moment at that time. And so we've been doing that ever since. That was 11 years ago. So, happy ending, good story. Still going, continuing.
Oh yeah, and we're using this concept. We did over about 3 square miles, and we'll use it to redo all 45 square miles.
There's places where like all that water was, and no birds. Well, we can go in and we can say, okay, we'll take that water off of there, or some of that water off of there, and some of that water is going to go to Los Angeles, and some of that water is going to go into those sweet spots the birds have chosen to kind of enhance those and make those even richer. Because remember, the idea is not to lose any of the baseline habitat values. We decided we couldn't just go on numbers because there's too many variables saying, okay, this year you only got 98,742 instead of 100,000, you're out of compliance. I mean, it's a nightmare. There's so many things away from the lake that can affect the numbers of birds. We needed to do something else. That was a little bit of a learning curve for some of the people. So that's the basis of it. So models, if you're in biology and you're even in water or whatever you're doing, there's models used in just everything. And they're meant to help us. And they're meant to make better and better and better and better. We're trying to think of one now for groundwater under us because one of the outstanding things coming is whether we want to look under the lake for groundwater and use some of that water and offset some of the aqueduct water. So, should we do that? How should we do that? What's the quality of the water? How can we keep from doing harm? And I don't know, that work group's been, I don't know how long that work group's been going on. But we're getting closer.
Were you talking about earlier with the issues with changing how they decided to restore this area? Was it just because of pushback where they wanted to restore it how it used to be and they were just putting water in and they weren't doing, or was it more just qualitative?
What do you think? At first the water just came on, right?
Yeah, so...
it was a dust project, not a wildlife project.
Exactly, it's a dust project. So it was, you have to control this area, these 10 square miles in 2 years to get it done.
Right in here, this 10 square miles.
And so the choices are few, and it was water to put out there to get it done in that time frame. So there is no specific, you have to do this from at least our regulator, but then, or our dust control, but then it's state lands, so we have to get a lease to do that. And so there's crazy ideas. Oh, let's go toss all our used tires out there. I don't control the dust. But
Seriously?
the landowner wasn't too happy about
Rubbish,
that.
haul trash from Kern County. They did from 1978 when they first started talking about fixing dust at Mono Lake, and then somebody said, well, crime and Etleys, what about Owens Lake? It's way worse. But in 1978, the dust issue hit the fan in the Eastern Sierra. And DWP said, well, we're not ready to accept culpability, but we're willing to pay for science, what's going to work and how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And I think there was like 20 years, up until 1998, of the tires, sand fences, spraying different adhesives, rolling it.
We never did that.
You never did the adhesive? Probably couldn't get an okay for that.
State lands wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. So, but I think that went on for like 20 years, and that was like $52 million or something. So, and so in 1998, that's when the MOU actually fixed the lake. The other piece that we do, I think, accept the responsibility, and we'll do what's feasible, and we'll make the air healthy again. But it was still at that point a dust project. It was later it kind of folded into wildlife. It's been a wonderful accident, kind of like the pipe breaking at the gorge.
Any other questions?
Questions, guys?
What's the deepest well? You have like shallow test wells, and then you have like really deep wells for pumping.
So here there are essentially 5 separate aquifers under the lake.
5 layers of water.
So that aquifer is, there's something, usually a clay separation between a sandy area that sort of old lake sediments. And so I think the 5th one, the deep one, goes down to some 1,200 feet. And it's under pressure. You put a pipe in, put it in, and it'll shoot up 30 feet. So it varies, and you can use the different aquifers in different ways. The shallow aquifer that all this is very, the upper unconfined aquifer is very shallow. You have clay sediments, and so there's not much before it hits the impermeable layer up top. Does that answer your question?
There's about 10 or 12 sites around the lake where there's 3 monitoring wells. Roughly 500, 1,000, and 1,500, roughly. The lake sediments out here at the south end go to 8,000 to 10,000 feet deep. That's how deep the hole is here. If we could snap our fingers and all the rock and clay was gone. So those are places where if production wells are turned on, we can measure how the water behaves in those to work on a groundwater model, to try to learn how does this water behave, because we have earthquake faults going through this lake. And underground, an earthquake fault is kind of a semi-permeable thing. I mean, sometimes water goes through pretty easy, sometimes not at all. And so if you're pumping on one side, the same side as where there's a spring or a wetland, you could harm it severely. Whereas if it's on the other side, possibly it might be more protected. Because we have major faults behind you at the Indian, for the Indian Mountains, a major fault in the middle and a major fault over on the Sierra side. Yeah. So it's complicated. Lots of parts.
How worried are you guys about like a seismic event? Like how disruptive do you guys plan for that to be for the project? Are you guys is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
one
I
of those
can't.
things that's like
I mean,
once
I
it
can't.
happens you'll figure it out?
Well, yeah, I think 1872. This fault here, one of the biggest historical. Before we really know how big, but huge, a huge earthquake.
Yeah.
And I think estimates say that was pretty recent, and so another big one occurring on this fault is unlikely in the immediate future.
About 10 years ago, there was a cluster that kept occurring at the southeast end of the lake, and it broke a 20-inch. It split or dislocated a 20-inch pipe.
Oh wow.
Yeah. The 1872 earthquake, the lake dropped on that side, and the whole lake moved to that side and kind of went up about a foot on that, and then like the bathtub, and then it came back over to this way, and it remained pulled away from this shore ever after that, after 1872, by a fair distance. It left a little town over here, a little place at Swansea, right there, high and dry.
So, your question on infrastructure, there are a lot of difficulties and concerns about infrastructure on the lake bed. Earthquakes are sort of way down there. Subsidence, just the salinity alone just eats away
Corrosion.
everything.
Yeah.
Stainless, it's expensive. You have to put stainless steel, but it's tough on all stuff. Even our vehicles have half the normal life because of working in these conditions. So working on Owens Lake is just inherently different and difficult because of the soils and the soil.
It's just so gross.
Yes. It's a nasty place. Unless you're in the
You
sweet
saw
spots
some of
with the birds.
some of that work there. Pipe broke, and they're digging it up to sort of repair it.
How much visitation do you guys get out here?
This is
Do you guys have
Only guess. I don't know.
yeah. This is the first real thing that's open to the public.
There's three open areas for the public. On the weekends, there's usually not any work out here, and some people kind of explore elsewhere.
They're mostly locals and then birders for travel.
It's duck hunters. There are duck hunters that come out,
During
goose
fall.
hunters, and there's more and more birders all the time. If you go to eBird, if you go to eBird, you'll get. That's a place where you can post things you see in places online. There's a downside with that is that we're concerned a little bit about our sensitive species out here is the snowy plover. It's not listed like the coastal one, but it is a species of special concern. It's a separate and distinct population, and they look at a road and it's a beach. I mean it looks good, you know. So they'll put a nest out there. So we're concerned. The DWP people are all trained, and all their contractors are trained. They've got to go to snowy plover school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and learn how to identify them from a hornlark and a chicken and a buzzard and where do they nest and I tell you, if they find something, they call it in, and if the biologists are out, if they verify it, like a needle goes in the map or on the computer more likely, and that's the working map. I think they've even occasionally closed some roads. A lot of fun stuff. They used to give a sticker that had a snowy plover on it for some of the contractors.
They do. You don't have your 2017 sticker yet?
I do. I have my original one. I do. Okay. Could stay out here all day. Great stargazing.
That's bird.
Oh yeah.
It is a day use area, but it is an awesome sky. It's a really dark sky.
Camping out here?
No.
No,
No?
it's a day. It's considered day use.
But is there camping nearby?
There are
yeah,
campgrounds.
tons.
Yeah,
There's
no problem.
BLM, Forest Service, and county
Okay.
campground. Yeah. And if you go out that way in the desert, it's just coyote camping. I mean, you just,
Yeah.
go up the dirt road and make yourself a home. Get out the old lawn chair,
All right, so
crack a sandwich. And
Speaking of camping, though, if Enza Borrego is going to be blooming in the next like 2-3
Yeah.
days
that's right.
Yeah.
It's ready to really go off.
because all the rains.
Yeah. And that's going to work its way this way to here.
The bloom?
Yeah, our bloom,
yeah.
our
Oh,
bloom
wow.
here will be April, May.
So maybe the
And then
birding
right up into
festival.
the Sierra. You can just follow.
What kind of flowers do you guys get?
Well, desert kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, desert, more arid stuff. So everybody knows how to get off the lake. Oh, Jeff will take us
yeah,
off.
we'll guide you out.
We're just going to watch out for giant trucks coming from the
Okay.
quarry.
Well, thank you both so much. If you
You're
don't have any other
welcome.
questions.
Is this a what not to do thing?
I don't have my card, but Linda
We're
has.
going birding.
They need to go
Linda has
further,
some,
further away.
Hold on. Will you guys
working on a
shake
paper
their
even
hand
next
for
to
an
you,
example?
or a different class or whatever, you're doing something, you
So
need
clinical.
information or people to contact, please contact. I do that a lot with students and writers and film people, and I especially like to do it with students. So I can do a lot of, I won't do all the work, but I can help you find what you're looking for.
Maybe future capstone students might want to consider that if you're interested in birds. You
Yeah.
don't have to do your capstone.
And if you
At
want to
Channel
come up
Islands.
and camp sometime and then just come out and look at the lake, let me know, because I bring people out a lot.
Thank you so
You're
much.
very welcome. Have a great trip up there. Continue your trip. Have a great trip.
Thank you.
Enjoy.